10 players to stash before week 6 kicks off. This is Beat the Waiver Wire. We are getting closer and closer to our subscribe goal of 1,000. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. First player I want to talk about here is Bhayshul Tuten. So you see he's 42% rostered, and that has been slowly declining. However, I do think that there is going to be a role for him long term. So this is something, if you have an open bench spot, somebody's hit IR, you've lost somebody for the season, and you're kind of looking around the waiver wire for somebody that could give you long-term value, Tuten, I think, is your guy this week. He's got 2 games, Seattle and the Rams, before his bye week, and we're notorious for talking about how rookies' roles can change coming out of the bye week. So obviously, ETN has been dominating snaps. Tuten did have a receiving touchdown in week 2 and then a rushing touchdown in week 3. So he's been involved a little bit in the red zone. And I do think that he's a very explosive player who could definitely see that role grow in the second half. So if you're looking for somebody long-term, I think you do a lot worse than Tuten, somebody that I'm trying to get onto every roster I possibly can. Next running back that I want to talk about is Will Shipley. So if you're watching this later in the week, unfortunately, you won't be able to add him because he is playing on Thursday night. But I did want to mention him because Saquon Barkley was banged up in the game last week. He missed practice on Monday, but then they did say that he's going to be not on a snap count, that he's going to play his full allotment. And so I do think that Saquon probably is going to have a pretty good game against the Giants. Revenge narrative. They didn't run the ball very well last week. And I think maybe that has to do with Saquon's injury, but we're not really going to know that, unfortunately. So Will Shipley, somebody that if you have Saquon, I would try to get on my team just in case, if you have somebody going on IR. And again, that's a little bit tough because it's early in the week. But just in case you have the spot, just in case you want to go and handcuff Saquon, I would do that with Will Shipley. You've seen here that he's not playing a ton, and that's not that uncommon for a Saquon Barkley backup. But overall, I do think if Barkley were to go down, Shipley, again, one of those guys that probably is going to get a 15 to 20% bid. So go out and get Will Shipley on your team if you are Saquon Barkley. Getting into the wide receivers now, we've got Darnell Mooney as the first guy up. So his roster percentage dropped sharply down to 42% when he was on bye. Definitely a popular drop, but I do think that, we saw him come into the season injured, and then he had that 89% snap share game, and it was like, okay, here we go. Mooney's going to get more and more involved. He had 11 targets, and then he got banged up in week 4 going into the bye. So, understandably, only 1 for 15. It doesn't look that good. He kind of stumbled out of the gate, but now coming out of the bye week, he should be fully healthy. And over the rest of the season, it is something where I do think that he can carve out a significant role here. So we did see him be very productive in certain spots last year. And I do think that he is somebody that in 3 wide receivers especially can be rostered with some confidence here, and that during bye weeks or further injuries can be started. So obviously we're hoping to see more consistency out of Penix. That's something that he struggled with a little bit early in the year, but he's had 2 good games, 2 kind of iffy games. And if we do start to see that consistency build up in the passing game, I think that's going to have a lot to do with the fact that Darnell Mooney is going to be out there a lot more. So is he going to get 11 targets very often? I don't think so, right? I think Drake London still going to be the alpha. Kyle Pitts has looked pretty good so far this year. So overall, he's probably going to be the number 3. But if he does kind of slot back into that number 2 spot in the offense in the passing game, I do think that this is somebody that you can count on moving forward. So, and there just aren't going to be a lot of players like that, especially ones that are on the waiver wire this available. So again, beat the waiver wire, somebody that if he comes out against Buffalo and he has, 8 targets, 6 catches and 85 yards, this is going to be one of the top waiver names that you'll hear at the wide receiver position next week. Next guy up is Jalen Coker. So we mentioned him last week in this video. We thought maybe he'd come off of IR, but didn't quite get ready for week 5. However, he has been practicing in full, so it does seem that he is set to make his season debut. And I don't think he could possibly have a better matchup for this than Dallas. Obviously, Tet McMillan is going to be the one, but nobody has really stepped up behind him to kind of take a command of the number 2 option in the passing game. Now, Carolina's offense has been terrible. Bryce Young has not maintained that leap that he took last year. But I do think that Coker, again, somebody that could come out and get 8 targets immediately as that number 2 option in the passing game, somebody that was productive last year with Bryce Young. And so, I would definitely be looking to do it now. And the Dallas matchup makes it so he could actually be significantly productive if this is going to be his first game. So, then it's Jets, Buffalo, Green Bay, pretty tough road ahead after that Dallas game. But I do think this is somebody at receiver, 3 wide receiver leagues. Again, it's somebody that can really be productive and has shown that he can be productive down the stretch. He's a good deep ball guy. He can still earn targets as well. So overall, big fan of Jalen Coker, young player too. So, if he has a mini second year breakout here after starting the year on IR, I think that he can be somebody that can really help bolster your bench, if nothing else. Next guy, similar to Coker, coming off of injury to start the year. And, maybe we've kind of overplayed Christian Watson at this point. People are sick of hearing about him, that he's going to break out or he's going to be good. And maybe it's more of just he's coming to muddy the waters in Green Bay. Obviously, we don't want that. We're both Matthew Golden fans. We want to see him try and break out. Romeo Doubs still scoring touchdowns. But with Reed out, I do think that there is still some opportunity, especially down the field in this Green Bay offense. So maybe Christian Watson can get that going. So he coming out of the bye is limited. So maybe not yet ready to come off IR, but they did open his window this week, and so going into next week, if he doesn't play this week, I would expect him back in week 7. And, if he plays this week at Cincinnati, that would be an amazing way for him to debut against a good team. Maybe he catches a long touchdown and you start seeing him all over waiver wire columns. And he's only 8% rostered. This is somebody that's widely available. So if you're hurting at wide receiver, you have that open spot, you have deep benches. Christian Watson is somebody I think that's worth picking up and somebody that you can slot into your IR slots, if you want to just hold him for a week and kind of get in front of any potential news about him looking good in practice or about him being active. The 4th receiver we're going to go over here is Luther Burden. So, this one is definitely a long-term play. And this one is rookie coming out of a bye week, right? We're really, really hoping that the talent kind of shows through and that he's able to take over as the number 3 and get on the field a little bit more. He showed deep play ability on the 65-yard touchdown in week 3, had an absolutely atrocious week 4. So, you see that reflected in the 25% roster percentage, not held a lot through the bye weeks. Now, there is still a group of people out there holding on to him just because of talent. The offense overall has looked solid. Romadunze has been kind of the touchdown maker. And DJ Moore, honestly, hasn't really been that good this year. So there seems to be opportunity here for the Bears. We'll also talk about Colston Loveland here in a sec, but Burden out of the bye against Washington, going up against the Saints in week 7, I do think that there's a potential pathway for him to get some momentum here. So get him on your teams if you have a bench spot. Definitely if you're looking for a long-term play, and you want to try and get 1 week before the breakout. This is the type of guy I wouldn't mind adding, at this time in the week. And then dropping, if he doesn't end up doing anything going into next week type of thing, and then adding to the end of your bench and trying to just get in front of his inevitable breakout game. And the last receiver I want to talk about here is Jayden Higgins. So overall, we both really liked Higgins as a prospect. He was the 33rd overall pick in this year's draft. And there was a lot of talk that he was going to be the number 2 wide receiver in this offense, right? That he was going to be out there in all the 2 wide receiver sets. Now, that has not come to fruition yet this year, but in week 5 he did play the most snaps that we've seen him play, right? First time over 50% of the snaps. He got the most targets he's gotten in the game with 4 going into his bye week. So again, you need players. It's kind of hard to justify holding him, but I do think coming out of his bye week, again, same with the Luther Burden situation. It's rookie coming out of a bye week. Hopefully he's more involved. I know Christian Kirk has come back from injury and has taken some targets there, but I just think Jayden Higgins is super talented and ideally is somebody that can start winning in the middle part of the field, intermediate range of the field, and can be helpful overall to the offense, but also to fantasy managers as his role continues to expand throughout the year. As promised, when I was talking about Burden, next guy up is going to be Colston Loveland. So only 29% rostered. He has dropped He has been dropped in a lot of leagues, but there's obviously still a ton of talent here. He was the 10th overall pick. He did get picked in front of Tyler Warren, somebody that's pretty much a consensus top 5 tight end, not somebody that you're going to see on waiver wires and somebody that you'd have to pay up for in trade at this point in the year. And so maybe there's an opportunity for Colston Loveland to kind of be Tyler Warren light, or like, just break out a little bit later in the year. Similar idea, coming out of a bye week as a rookie, going up against Washington, the Saints, Baltimore in the next couple of weeks. They're going to have the opportunity to throw the ball a lot. And ideally, we're going to see a lot of Colston Loveland. So before he got hurt in week 3, too, he had that 30-yard reception. He had 3 targets, a little bit expanded role. He only played 10% of the snaps because he got injured super early in the game. But the fact that he already had the most targets he had seen in a game was definitely encouraging. I think if he gets out there for 60+% of the snaps, that this is somebody that we can see the role grow a lot here. So obviously he's dealing with Cole Kmet, something that Tyler Warren doesn't have to. And that I feel like is reminiscent of the Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox type of dynamic. But ideally, Loveland's talent is going to shine through. Ben Johnson really wanted to go out and get him in the draft, very first pick, 10th overall. And so Loveland, somebody that, I would kind of ignore the projections because it's so unknown what his role can be moving forward, that if he's even the one that steps into that number 2 in the passing game, I know DJ Moore is a pretty established player, so I don't know that he's going to be able to eclipse him. But if there is, a 2A, 2B type of situation, or he does kind of take over all of the targets from Cole Kmet, this is somebody whose talent is just super clear and could lead to a much bigger role as we go through the season. Moving over to the defenses now. So the first defense that I wanted to bring up is the New England Patriots, and they are surprisingly owned in 63% of leagues. So they get the Saints this week, so they rocketed up in roster percentage. But I will say, if they're still out there in your leagues, this is a defense that you want to get, because even next week they play Tennessee. So in the week after that, they get Cleveland. So there's a shot here that you're going to get to play them for 3 weeks straight if you are able to get them. They have been pretty good from a fantasy perspective, even though they haven't been great from a real life perspective. A lot of sacks early in the season, and then started holding opponents a little bit more in check on the scoreboard. And, Christian Gonzalez playing well in the secondary. So ideally, they can take advantage of this softer part of their schedule and score a bunch of points for you on defense. And finally, the last defense we're going to talk about here, in the 10th player overall, is the Kansas City Chiefs defense. So this one's much more widely available, 31% rostered, and they're going up against Detroit this week. So the chance that we get closer and closer to the end of the week and that 31% actually goes down is pretty good. So look for them to get cut in your leagues. And if they're out there and you want to stash a defense, I think the Chiefs are probably the best option for week 7. They go up against the Raiders. And with how turnover happy Geno Smith is, not only do you get points for those interceptions or fumbles, but also each one comes with an opportunity to score a touchdown. So it's just, the Raiders are one of the best matchups that you can try and take advantage of right now with how Geno is playing. And so I think Kansas City will be opportunistic in that game and really be able to hold the Raiders down. And, division games are already tough as it is. It's a little bit more physical, and the battle's always more difficult. So it's not going to be like the Chiefs are going to run up the score on them. I wouldn't anticipate. And, it can be something where the defense really takes pride in holding their division opponent, down as few points as possible. So, there's a legitimate shot that the Raiders score maybe 10 points in that game. And so I think stashing Kansas City for that matchup is something that would be smart if you're looking to prepare for the following week. All right. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching, and look forward to talking to you in the next one.